of Catholics, of the faithful.
That's right. I mean, a lot of people think about the Christian church and Christmas, but in fact, in the Catholic Church, there is no greater feast day than Easter, which celebrates the resurrection of Christ. And so there was a lot of talk about, first of all, frankly, a practical matter, that these cardinals wanted to get into the conclave, they wanted a new pope, and they wanted to be able to get back to their countries, to their dioceses, to be able to have Holy Week, which is the most important week of the year for them. In addition to that, it's just hard to imagine an Easter season without the Pope. And there was a lot of speculation. We've never heard this confirmed, but there was a lot of talk about one of the reasons that perhaps Pope Benedict decided to step down when he did is because of the grueling schedule that a Pope faces during Holy Week. And he talked about the vitality that he didn't have anymore. He didn't have the energy to do it. And so the timing couldn't be more perfect. Now the question really only is, first of all, how many minutes do we have to wait to find out who he is? And then when will the installation mass be? There was a lot of talk, Tamron, that they wouldn't want to do it on a Sunday, a traditional Sunday, because a Lenten Sunday is a time of soberness, so you don't want to have a celebration on a Sunday. So next Tuesday is actually the Feast of St. Joseph, which is a huge feast day here. It's hard to imagine that they will wait almost a full week for the installation mass, but maybe. So we'll see. But in the meantime, we have to figure out, Tamron, exactly who the new Pope is.
Absolutely. And Liz is still standing by with us. And Liz, one of the things that's been pointed out that has not happened or did not happen in 2005 is the Pope will stop for a moment of silent and solitary prayer. And this is significant. I mean, when you think about the times now and the responsibility, and that Pope Benedict XVI expressed the exhaustion, the emotional toll that this was taking on him as the leader of the church.
I'm sorry, I think Liz has lost you.
Okay,
but
that's okay.
Yeah,
This is a fluid situation.
You're
Go ahead,
absolutely
Chris.
right about that. Well, I was just going to say, as we're looking at this, the pomp and ceremony of this church is almost, I think, unparalleled. This is a tradition that goes back not dozens or hundreds, but thousands of years. What you're looking at is a ceremony this is the longest standing election in mankind. There has never been a continuous turning over of power the way that we have seen in the Catholic Church. And I'll bring Liz in since she can't hear you, but this really is extraordinary just in terms of the history that we're watching, Liz.
Well, the beauty is you have so much past and present in the same place. I mean, all these young faces, all these flags from countries that didn't exist when the papacy first started. Everybody is brought together. We see the Swiss Guard standing there, the 500-year-old guard of the Pope, a 500-year-old church, and a man who is going to take the place of the first Bishop of Rome, who died in this spot 2,000 years ago, almost 2,000 years ago.
And with us also is James Salt. James, let me bring you in. As to Chris's point, there is nothing like this in the world. And we saw a couple of people talking with Claudio. One individual said he's not even Catholic, but to be in this moment at this time, just from when the smoke emerged to the pageantry that we watch play out right now. But this is of great importance because what comes from this church is how people live their lives. And Chris Matthews spoke about the issue of contraception, the modern life we live with what some see as the antiquated way of the church. James.
Yeah, certainly, the pomp and circumstance is awe-inspiring. But, frankly, we have to be clear that this isn't about celebrating the church institution. This should be about celebrating God. And God is about love and inclusion. And that's what we really hope that the new pontiff brings more about into the spirit of the church. Rather than, clamping down on the rights of gay folks or, the women's right to access to contraception, let's talk about, what really matters to lay folks. And that's, bread and butter issues and family concerns, not, whether or not your neighbor can get married to the person they love.
But Chris Matthews, let me bring you back in to talk about that point. I mean, we can discuss the things that some within the church would like to see, but we're talking about what is realistic, whether it be priests being married, being able to marry again, or to your point about women even being deacons in the church or having a larger role. There's one thing to articulate the desire to see these things. It's another to, in a sense, change the church, which some see as a daunting, if not impossible task?
Well, I think there are great possibilities. I think the diaconate, raising women up to a very much stronger, more prolific role in the church. I know we have these debates here in this country where you'll have an archbishop over in Virginia or a bishop who will say, no girl altar servers. Well, that's out of date, and that's a fairly recent debate. Altar boys, altar girls. We should have more altar girls. I think we should have more deacons who are women. This is all easily done. It just raises the profile of women in the church, gives them an equal equality in terms of appearance within the church's liturgy. Put them up front. Let them deliver some of the sermons. These are easily done if you want to do it. And certainly respect for women. Mary is the great role model for women in the church, and it would not be a problem. I don't think it's as difficult as people can argue. For example, John the 23rd was able to make dramatic changes in the church, and I don't think some of the things are as important as others. For example, the shift from Latin to English, or the vernacular, wasn't a big deal. I'm not sure it was a good thing even. Maybe a little bit of old-time religion's a good thing. Maybe Latin is a little more magical and wondrous, like the Gregorian chant. Some things you need like that in any religion, just to bring you in the right mood to think about the eternal and to think about the spiritual. It's all helpful to human beings. I think there's a tremendous opportunity to do the right thing. There are issues like abortion. I really do believe that are not going to change, because it's a belief in when life begins. And I really think it's a crucial part of our faith to respect life in terms of what you should do. Not what the law says in your country, but what you should do personally, I think is always going to be a big part of the religion. But I do think caring for the poor, this is something that the church, my aunts have been very good at. They spend their lives teaching kids. And the work of the Catholic charities around the world is fantastic.
Yes.
We've been involved a bit with that, my wife and I, Kathy and I. You cannot underplay the fact that looking out for poor people, looking out for immigrants, looking out for drunks, people with real addiction problems. The church is really good at that. And every time we have a political discussion, it's always about abortion rights or that. And we ignore the fact that people like Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, the old governor years ago, passed away, was fantastic on this Dorothy Day Catholicism of the liberal looking out for people with problems, even though he was conservative, obviously, on abortion rights. And I think that's a big thing that a pope can lead on that. He can say, look out, be like Jesus. Hang out, with people that aren't so cool. Have friends like Mary Magdalene. Look out for people who have problems, physical problems, social problems, outcasts. Be the good Samaritan. If you look at Jesus, it's all about looking out for people with problems. It's not hanging out with the powerful.
Right, to your
It's not
point.
even like this. That's not what Jesus was about. And I think all religions, whenever you clean up the church, whether it's Martin Luther over the years or anybody who's tried to reform it, it's always to go back to Jesus. That is what the best of the reforms have done.
And to your point, Chris, especially in the urban cities of the United States, we would once see so many Catholic schools and young kids going and learning. I myself went to Catholic school, and you see them now shuttered as a result, in some cases, of lawsuits and declining numbers within the church. But those messages you talked about of helping and extending a hand to your brother and sister really were taught from a young age in these schools that now no longer exist in the numbers they did in the 70s, for example.
When I meet a young person from the inner city, maybe African American or Latina, and I always ask them, where'd you go to high school? Because if I see that spark of individual pride, of successes coming my way spiritually as well as materially, I can sense that they had some nun somewhere said to that young person, you're going to make it. You got to make it. Here's what you have to do to make it. That sense of individual respect is something the nuns are really good at. And they can also be brutal at times, too. I've had that experience as a kid. But they are very good at respecting individual kids. They may take the slowest kid in the class and work on that kid till they got him. They don't treat kids as numbers. And I'm not saying public schools do, but I'll say this. Sure. The Catholic Church does not treat kids as numbers. They treat them by name and as individual souls, individually important people. And I think that's why so many people come out of inner city, tough situations in their homes even, where they've had the advantage of Catholic school, and they really do bloom as people.
Let me bring back Father Bartunek. Father, there's so much happening behind the scenes as you gave us the rundown. The newly elected Pope goes to the Room of Tears. That's a small room off the Sistine Chapel. The Pope then re-enters the chapel in the prayer led by Cardinal Batista there, following a reading the passage from the Gospel. So much is happening behind the scenes, but we know now we are past the 30-minute mark, and perhaps in the next 5 minutes or so, we will hear the name and the new Pope will emerge from that scarlet curtain.
Yeah, 8 years ago when Pope Benedict came out, it was about 45 minutes between when the smoke came out and when then he came out onto the balcony. So it could be very soon. We're all kind of expecting. What you're seeing now is you're seeing the two bands here. I think one of the band from the Vatican in the blue, and then the band from the city of Rome representing the civic authorities, the ones with the red capes and the feathered hats there. And they're saluting each other, greeting each other. And that again is part of the tradition when the Pope gives his blessing to the city and to the world. I want to go back a little bit to some of the earlier comments. I think it's important to remember that the reason that the Church has such clear teachings on moral issues and such a clear and beautiful teaching on homosexuality, that all flows actually from the belief in Jesus Christ and from fidelity to his teachings. So I think we need to be very careful about kind of picking and choosing which current issues we think the next Pope might change. There's actually a beautiful unity in the teaching of the Church, and I think one of the great tasks of the next Pope will be to help explain that beauty better, because so many, even Catholics, don't understand the true beauty of these teachings, and we definitely need to do a better job of communicating those things.
Well, how do you believe the proper way then is to move forward? There is a thirst, as Chris talked about, James Salt, and you know far better than any of us, this thirst to see a modern message from the Church and the addressing of modern issues, whether they are considered to be a message of inclusion, or to Chris's point, the basic message of helping your brother and sister, helping the poor, and not rejecting the person whose hand is extended to you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, again, even as Chris Matthews mentioned earlier, it's going back to the gospel. Jesus included everyone, including sinners. He welcomed sinners, but he never told sinners that they didn't have to change. So it's a hard message. We all need to convert. We all need to trust that God's way of living, for instance, our human sexuality, is the wise way. And we also need to love our neighbors. It all goes together. So I really think that the kind of the modernization of the Church is really not about changing the fundamental teachings, but changing maybe or coming up with more creative ways to communicate that message, to make that message relevant. Because it's true, in certain parts of the world, especially in the Western world, in the United States and in Europe especially, the message has lost some of its flair, and I think that's because of the way it's been communicated. Now remember, Cameron, in other parts of the world, the Church is growing exponentially. In the 20th century, the amount of Catholics in Africa increased by 7,000%.
Yes.
In Asia, the Church is growing. So the Church is vital, but in a global world, finding new ways to communicate the beauty of our faith and looking at what things we can change and what things we can't, that's definitely going to be part of the job of our new Pope.
Chris Matthews, let me bring you back in. I just got a note. The sources say President Obama was notified of the White House, the Vatican, the white smoke, during his House GOP meeting, and he relayed the information to the House Republicans. So there you have the president there with House Republicans at a time of great division in this country. Yeah. And you have a budget, for example, that we've been discussing that some view as cutting out the poor, as you pointed out. I don't want to drag politics too much into this, but we know that it does flow into our conversations and of course even into what we decide as a priority.
Well, yeah, and just to get into the usual thing that you and I talk about, politics, the Catholic Church is about 50-50 in this country politically between the two parties right now. It isn't, there's no, Catholic Democrats, Catholic Republicans are equally, equally represent reality. So they don't take sides, the Catholics. It's an interesting block because unlike other ethnic groups or racial groups in this country, if you will, they don't have like a preferred default party. They were Reagan Democrats. They were for Eisenhower. They were for Republicans. They were for Bill Clinton. They're somewhat split on Obama. But I would like to see the president do something dramatically in terms of this new elevation, this coronation. I mean, I'd like to see him go over for it, but he may not do it. I think Vice President Biden will certainly be sent. I think the Secretary of State will definitely come, John Kerry. He's Roman Catholic. And I think there'll be a good representation. I think it'd be wonderful if the president went, but I don't think he will. I think he does have a sense of distance from the Catholic Church. I don't know, maybe it's his background. They don't naturally gel, I wouldn't say, together, those two points of view. And so I don't think he'll go, but I'd like him to go.
Yeah.
I think it'd be great if he went.
It would be.
There's a statement of crossing the aisle, if you will. I mean, of let's get together. It'd be nice.
Yeah, let me go back to Claudio Lavagna. He's standing by with a few New Yorkers there on the scene for the history that is unfolding. Claudio.
Tamron, hi. Well, I told you earlier on that thousands of people, as soon as they hear the news, they will just stream down or run down here to St. Peter's Square, not to miss that historic occasion. Well, among them, actually, four girls from Buffalo, New York. Where were you girls when you heard the news?
We were on the bus coming back from Pompeii.
From Pompeii? So you jumped off the bus?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
We made them stop the bus and we sprinted.
Yeah. Well, you have about 20 minutes before you see who the next pope will be. Any preference?
No, we're just excited to be here.
I mean, American would always be nice.
Well, that was well timed. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Well, Tamron, as you can see, well, loads of Americans, but there are people from all over the world here. They're all looking up at that balcony, waiting for the next pope to appear. Tamron?
Okay. Let's listen into a little bit of the ambiance so that you truly can soak in what we are experiencing. We could be minutes away from learning the name of the new pope. Let's listen in. As we talk about the tradition, Chris Matthews was saying that, you know, if you're looking at production value, nothing beats that smoke that the world was waiting to see. But we also can incorporate modern technology. Papal Twitter, of all things, the papal Twitter account has just changed back from sede vacante to pontiff. So you have the modern world of Twitter with, I got a thumbs up on my pronunciation, Father, with the modern world of Twitter with the traditions of this age-old church.
Yeah, the word pontifex is an old Latin term which means priest, or in the root of it is interesting, it's a bridge builder. And I think that kind of ties in with what you were saying. Pontifex means one who builds a bridge. The priest, the Pope, as the head of all the priests of the Catholic Church, is really one whose main job is to build bridges. Bridges especially between God and the human family, bridges between different parts of the human family, bridges between those who are alienated from God and from one another and those who need to be reconciled. And so I think even having that old Latin term as the name on the Twitter account kind of shows this characteristic of the church, to be a bridge between time and between space. And just one other thing, Tamron, about the ceremony and the beauty, the pageantry. You know, it isn't just an empty show.
Yeah.
We really believe as Christians that God redeemed the world. And so these things matter. And all those people you see in St. Peter's Square right now, they feel so included in this precisely because the ritual and the beauty of the place and of this ceremony. And so they're actually participating. So this really does matter. It expresses the presence of God who is present with us as human beings, who works through us, who brings us together. All of that is expressed by these beautiful ceremonies, these beautiful places.
Absolutely, Father.
I was going to say, what a juxtaposition, Tamron, of the old and the new, because you have the Pope's Twitter account being reactivated at the same time when, just think of it, there have been no leaks. No one knows who the new Pope is. You have this incredible tradition, and nobody knows what's going to happen next. I can remember from 8 years ago, so we're going to want to watch for this, Tamron, that we saw just a little movement in the curtains behind the balcony.
Yes.
And then you couldn't hear anything because the crowd went absolutely crazy. So we are awaiting this announcement.
Absolutely. 1.2 billion Catholics, but we know many more, Chris Matthews, around the world watching, because they do recognize the importance of church, the importance of faith, and whether you are a believer or not, to ignore the importance, I think, would be a great failure, as it does play a role in the lives of many, many people. But Chris, let's talk about the church and the expansion. We heard the Father talk about Asia, Africa, and South America, but we know that a lot of the money comes from the U.S. and so many people have pulled back, if you will, from the church, from whether they give their donations or whether they give their hearts. And this is a big moment for the many Americans who are watching, whatever the name that is uttered and announced here shortly.
Well, that's true, but I just think that all that we've talked about from the conservative and the more progressive side the last half hour or so is all true. It's all different perspectives, and I wouldn't get into an argument with anyone about theology or doctrinal issues because I think they're all valid in many ways, each of them. But I do think the personality of the next pope is going to be really important. If it's Scala, he can speak English. That's very important to us. You know, we like to hear it in our language. He can communicate. If this pope has a language, a linguistic ability, like Willette up in Quebec, if they can speak to us in our language, it's very powerful for us. And we do want a connection. I think one of the interesting things about Scala is he went to Catholic U here in town here. So he's been a resident of Washington, which is sort of another connection we'd like to get. I mean, we're all nationalists. I'm a nationalist. I mean, I want an American pope, too. I think it'd be great if Tim Dolan got it or Sean O'Malley got it. I don't think it's going to happen because I think the Cold War still has the power in the world. The Cold War said you can't choose between East and West. You had to come down somewhere in the middle. You couldn't pick an American. It's just too much lopsided politics. And I think that still holds sway. We're still the superpower, too, and it's tough to get people to vote from other countries for the superpower candidates. But, you know, anything's possible. I still think it's Scala, but the magic of this time is that for the first time in my lifetime, we actually do think that we had candidates in the field. And just like getting the first African-American president, the first woman president, the first step is to get candidates in the field.
Yes.
And we had, I think it's fair to say, based on all the buzz, that O'Malley and certainly Tim Dolan of New York were taken seriously by the world press.
It certainly sounds that way. And Liz, let me bring you into Chris's point. He has said all along he believes it's Scola, Archbishop of Milan, but this is the first time that we've heard a serious, or at least in the media consideration, we don't know what happened behind closed doors, but it appears by all accounts there was a serious dialogue regarding an American perhaps being the new pope.
It's been a really thrilling idea that all of a sudden all these doors open. I mean, we've been looking everywhere from the Philippines to the United States to Canada. It's just this incredible new vast sense of universal, which is what the church is supposed to be. And I look at this crowd and these flags from all over the world, and all the colors are all very different. There is one thing in common. Every one of those faces praying, intent, smiling, joyful. They are willing to give. Whoever comes to that balcony, they're willing to give him a chance. The question is, who is it going to be and how is he going to pick up this glorious opportunity?
And James, I want you in the conversation as well, because we cannot ignore the scandals that still exist and will exist after the name of the next pope is announced here perhaps in the next few minutes. You had a petition where thousands signed wanting certain cardinals not to participate for concern over how they handled the church's child sex abuse scandal and ongoing issues. This does not go away, James, with the utterance of a name.
Absolutely, and I just want to make the point that whomever walks out onto that balcony today won't necessarily have the same level of deference to their authority that previous generations perhaps gave to their pontiffs. And I'll say that probably the first thing that the new pope should do is fire Robert Finn. We're talking about the Bishop of Kansas City who was convicted of sex abuse after the Dallas Charter, is not even eligible to serve as a catechist in his own diocese, yet still somehow remains in office. These are the kind of reforms that I'm looking for. If Scola is has been elected, I think it's going to be very fascinating to see how we go about cleaning house in the Vatican. Scola is very much about the anti-establishment of the Vatican bureaucracy. He's not so much about changing the priorities of the church moving forward in the 21st century. And it is also very much about holding progression of the Second Vatican Council reforms down. And so these are the things that I'm most interested in seeing in this new pontiff.
Father Bertunik, let me bring you in on that. When you have, and James is a devoted Catholic, he says, and you have others who have that burning feeling in their hearts of disappointment in how the church has handled it. What do you say? What words of comfort do you offer at this time of great celebration there in Vatican City, but still great concern that will continue after the name?
I am so grateful for the people who've really let their concerns be known, the people who haven't accepted silence. They've brought these concerns to the table. They've, perseveringly really made the Church in the United States look at these things. The current generation of bishops are facing them, are having to face them, and now are facing them willingly. And, one of the reasons personally that I think the American cardinals here in Rome kind of got so much traction, if you will, as possible candidates is because they're learning the lesson. They're beginning to really learn that these things have to be faced squarely. They have to be faced openly. As a matter of fact, when the general congregation started, those were the meetings last week that all the cardinals had to talk about issues and persons before the conclave began. There was they take a vow of secrecy. They're not supposed to reveal what was discussed in those meetings, and yet the American cardinals, right as those meetings began, the American cardinals had scheduled a daily press briefing because they wanted to. They couldn't give details, but they wanted to keep channels of communication open. Now it's interesting that after the first day, that was those were canceled.
Yes.
The cardinals said, "Well, that's a little too much." What I think that shows us is that the American cardinals have learned and are learning, and these issues, they're real issues. They're issues that people care about deeply. They're not the only issues in the church, and there's a lot of great things happening in the church, but we can't pretend they don't exist. My hope is that some of the leadership of the American cardinals, even if one of them wasn't elected pope, will help communicate what they've learned in the States to the cardinals and the bishops from other parts of the world, so that as a church, as a whole church, we can really move forward and continue the healing process which has begun, but I think we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, and it is now 3 o'clock Eastern time. It was at 2:06 Eastern that we saw the white smoke emerge from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel. Liz, we're waiting here. We know a lot happens that is not seen on camera, including the reading of the passage from the Gospel, the Pope re-entering the Sistine Chapel with prayer, each cardinal then approaching the new Pope, congratulating him and pledging his obedience to him. The new Pope then leads the cardinals in singing a hymn of praise and thanksgiving, and before he appears, the new Pope will stop for a moment of silent and solitary prayer. We don't know how long this is going to take. We estimated about 45 minutes, Chris Jansing, based on the TikTok, if you will, of Benedict XVI. But here's the anticipation. We're almost at the 1 hour mark. These people are in the rain. We feel like we're bursting from the seams here because of the moment that we're watching. And I quite honestly, when you're there on a quote-unquote non-exciting day, the Vatican is incredible. So something like this, it just takes your breath away.
It's hard to even describe the emotion that is rushing through Rome right now, and I have to believe around the world as well. There has been so much anticipation. You just walk down the streets, it's all people are talking about. But look at the size of this crowd. There is this long street that goes down from St. Peter's Square, the Conciliazione, and people have been pouring in, and we saw them sort of huddled together for hours, and they were shivering, and they had their umbrellas up. And then we hear that there's a new pope. They see the white smoke, and it's as if some wave of heat has come over the crowd. And I think it's the adrenaline, it's the excitement, it's the anticipation. You can see the flags of so many countries, including, frankly, countries that don't have cardinals, so they're not going to have a pope from their country. But they are joined in this sense of excitement, of history, and of possibility, because I think everyone knows you don't have to be an American Catholic. You don't even have to be Catholic to understand the challenges that have faced the church, to understand the history that was made when Pope Benedict stepped down, and the sense that there could be the start of something new. Just the idea, again, that an American was talked about as a pope, and even if it's not a North American who is the new pope, the idea that they have a level of influence, perhaps, that has not been seen in the past. The idea that they are being taken so seriously that they would be considered for pope gives you an indication that the concerns, that the issues, that all of the people in America have brought to the church are being heard in a very clear way. But for all of that, look at the faces of the crowd.
Right.
Tamron, this is a moment of absolute celebration.
Absolutely it is, Chris. And let me go to Claudio Lavagna. He's standing by with more people who are in that crowd witnessing firsthand the celebration. Claudio.
Well, Tamron, no need to tell you who these guys are supporting. Well, the American Cardinals. These are two students living abroad here in Rome. Well, one is Lincoln from Connecticut. The other one is Jacob from New York. Well, guys, who are you supporting?
O'Malley. Cardinal Dolan.
Obviously, O'Malley and Dolan has been tipped as the front runners among Cardinals, but do you really care whether it's an American Pope, or would you support anybody that shows up on that balcony next?
I would support anyone. It would be nice to be American, but as long as they're a good change for the Catholic Church. I agree. I'd obviously love it to be an American, but any Pope that's ready for change in the churches, I approve of.
Thank you very much, guys. Well, as you can see, American flags here, but flags from all over the world in the square, just waiting and standing by to see who's up on that balcony next, Tamron.
Thank you, Claudia. Let me bring in Chris. Chris, I'm curious of your reaction. You have children of your own, and here you've got two young men in Rome, and they have their picks, but in the end, they're looking for someone, as they said, would bring good change to the church. What is your reaction to that, seeing those young faces?
Well, it's great. I mean, I love Rome. I think they're the best looking people in the world, because they just are. They seem to walk a lot. They glow. They know how to wear a leather jacket with flair. They really are amazing people when you walk around Rome. It's just something to watch. And then they all look great there. The people are all sparkling in their faces, just radiant. And I think that the young people especially look good over there. There's something about this excitement, though. As I said, the show business of this thing that can't be underplayed. But for an American to get elected Pope, it's almost like Miracle on Ice, winning the Olympics in hockey, against the Soviets. It's playing their game. It's like the Tchaikovsky competition where Van Cliburn, we just lost him, won that thing as a young man. It's not our playing field. And for an American, it's exciting. The very prospect of it is exciting because it's so remote. I think, and I think those young guys there knew it. They had the flag on their back, but their brains were telling them it's going to be an Italian. But that's my view of the thing, because I'm a political guy, and I think politically all the time, and it's my job. It's my job.
No, I get it. And you mentioned Van Cliburn. I have to mention, of course, Fort Worth, Texas, since we're all giving out love to our home places. That's my hometown. But Chris Jansing, let me bring you back in on this. Here we are, exactly 1 hour. 1 hour to the minute that we saw the smoke, and still we don't know a name. You were there before, and when so many were saddened, mourning the loss of John Paul, and now here we are, celebration and awaiting the name of the next pope.
And we heard this enormous cheer go up from the crowd, so there was some movement behind one of the windows. Liz, what did you see?
The lights went on. The upper balcony lights had just gone on.
So clearly, the new pope is in the house, so to speak, and the crowd has grown from thousands. Well, he had to make his way, and it's a beautiful walk, obviously. Somebody just peeked out. Somebody just peeked out of the curtains. This crowd is getting very quiet now, because they believe he's going to that we're going to hear.
And their curtain is moving.
The French cardinal.
There's the curtain moving.
There's movement.
There's movement behind the curtain.
And the French Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran will announce the name of the new pope. And we see the movement on the curtain, the anticipation. We are now 1 hour, 1 minute from the moment we learned through the smoke that the world had a new pope. The Catholic Church, the 1.2 billion Catholics, would have a new leader here. You see a little bit of red as well behind the curtain. Chris Matthews, this feels almost like the most extraordinary sporting event of all times here when you look at the crowd and their flags and the anticipation, but most of all, the happiness, the exuberance that's coming from this moment at a time of great difficulty, not just in the States, but worldwide, Chris.
Us from a troubling time. and can unite us. And I don't just mean Catholics, but to make the world proud of this person. I think people, whether they're Protestant or Jewish or another religion, Islamic, they want a pope that's a good person. He is a very important person in the world, and he's a worldwide figure. They want a good one. And by the way, anyone who puts down the power of the church in terms of human destiny should remember what Stalin said, that terrible leader of the Soviet Union, who said, how many divisions does the Pope have? Well, he had enough to defeat you, buddy. And the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. The Catholic Church was the greatest bulwark against the Soviet Union for all those years in countries like Poland and all the countries of Europe and around the world. It was the Catholic Church that stood up against that totalitarianism. So it does have a survival rate, which I think basically beats just about every other institution in the world right now after 2,000 years. And the idea that it's not important is fallacious. It is very important what this man will be able to say to the world and what he will represent. It is really important what we're watching right now. It's not about smells and bells, as somebody might say about the Catholic Church and its rituals. It's about the importance of the moral statement that could come from a great Catholic leader. And it's a could, and it's a hope. And that's why we are, many of us, worried as well as concerned and also hopeful that we'll be delivered to a leader. Because we do need a leader.
Beautifully put, Chris. Let me go back to Father Martinez. We saw the movement behind the curtain, Father. The light is on. We see someone walking back and forth. The moment is near. If we know the events that play off away from the cameras, it appears that we are very close, sir.
Yeah, it appears we are. It's kind of a long walk from the Sistine Chapel to the Pauline Chapel and then all the way to the balcony of blessings. When the doors of the balcony open up, the Master of Ceremonies will come out, maybe another sacristan. The Dean of the Cardinals may come out as well, but the one who will make the announcement that we have a new Pope is called the Proto-Deacon. And there's kind of three groups of cardinals. One of the groups is the Cardinal Deacons. And the French Cardinal, Cardinal Turan, is the the first among the Cardinal Deacons. So he has the honor of kind of making the official announcement. He will say, Gaudium Annuncio Vobis Gaudium Magnum, which is Latin for I have news of great joy to announce. And then he'll say, Abemus Papam, we have a Pope. And then he will say the name of the Pope. And he did that 8 years ago as well. He was the same cardinal who made that announcement for Pope Benedict. So that'll be kind of the next thing that happens here. And then the Pope himself will come out and pronounce a blessing over the crowd, over the whole city, and over the whole world. You know, as listening to some of the other comments and as we're watching these flags, I saw a Polish flag there as well, and I couldn't help but think of John Paul II and what an impression he made the very first moment that he came out onto that balcony. He broke from tradition a little bit. Instead of just giving the blessing, he also gave a couple words off the cuff. He told everyone not to be afraid, to open their hearts. And here we go now. It looks like the doors are going to be open.
Let's listen in. Anticipation building, as you see there on your television screen. There's clearly a hand on the handle of the door. We're simply waiting for that door to open. As Father Bertunik pointed out, the Proto-Deacon, French Cardinal Jean-Louis Turan, will be the person who announces the name of the new Pope. You hear the crowd picking up in intensity, their reaction. Here we go.
I announce to you news of great joy. We have a new Pope.
Eminentissimum,
His Eminence
Dominum,
and very reverend
Dominum
Lord
Georgium Marium, Sancte Romane Ecclesiae Cardinalem Bergoglio,
Cardinal Bergoglio,
qui sibi nomen imposuit Franciscum,
Francisco, he has taken the name Francisco.
Father Bertunez, can you please tell us what we've just heard here?
Yes, the Cardinal, the proto-deacon announced that we have news of great joy, a new Pope, and the Pope was Cardinal Bergoglio, who I believe comes from Argentina, who it is said that in the last papal conclave, he actually received a lot of the votes there as kind of the runner-up behind Cardinal Ratzinger. And then he said that this Pope has taken the papal name, I believe, of Francis, which would be the first Pope who's taken the name Francis.
So Cardinal,
and a lot of people thought that. I was just going to say he's from Argentina. He is 76 years old, but the fact that he is from Argentina is extraordinary.
Yes.
You have to understand the history that is being made here. 42% of the world's Catholics now come from Latin America. He did come in by a lot of reports second to Joseph Ratzinger at the last papal conclave. Many people believed that at 76 he was too old, and so you didn't hear his name. It was not taken seriously. This is an extraordinary moment in the Catholic Church. It's an extraordinary moment throughout Latin America. You can only imagine the reaction that is going on there. This is the part of the world where the Catholic Church has been growing, where vocations have been growing, and they are getting ready to unfurl. And Liz, this is your area of history, this beautiful papal banner.
Yes, they're putting out a papal banner. However, the papal banner does not yet have a coat of arms. The difference between this papal banner is that this is for our brand new Pope. We're seeing him for the first time. We've just heard his name, Francis I, for the very first time. And then the next time we see the banner come out, the new Pope will have chosen his coat of arms, and that banner will be filled with whatever image that this new Pope, Francis, chooses to take.
Liz, let me talk about the significance of
what
this
he's
being
known for. I was just going to say really quickly, this is someone who is known as a vocal advocate for the poor. If he is known for one thing, it is that. And to Chris Matthews' point and what you've been talking about, Tamron, the church has wanted to also point out the things they are doing in the world that are positive. And they certainly have a long history of the poor and the oppressed, helping people throughout the world. This is a Pope who has spoken about this extensively and in fact has made it one of the causes of his life.
In fact, the name is a very important indication. I was thinking that this really addresses the things that Chris Matthews was bringing up. Francis, who was married to poverty, Francis, whose commitment to the poor, the humble, the marginalized, the people who were left out, this new name, first name, what an amazing statement for a great change in the church.
Father Bertunez, let me bring you in on this to the point of, for so many years, we've heard conversations of the desire to have a Pope from Latin America, the politics of it, the representation, and here we are at this moment that, quite honestly, we have talked about year upon year. I am from Texas. We know the influence of the church in Hispanic communities around the world, but here we are now, Argentina, the Archbishop of Argentina, and now he's the church leader. What is the major message you believe has been sent at this moment?
Well, I think there's a bunch of messages. First of all, the fact that it was chosen on the first full day of voting shows that the cardinals most likely were very much in agreement on the type of person they wanted and on this person in particular. And that's important. The new Pope has to be able to form a team, to work very closely with the bishops throughout the world, with the cardinals, so that they came to an agreement quickly. Shows that there was a lot of agreement, that they're kind of all on the same page. I think that's important to keep in mind. And then Cardinal Bergoglio, I actually had a chance to meet him a few years ago during one of the Synod of Bishops. And what struck me most about him is, although he is he's very respected as a theologian. He's very respected as a pastor, someone who knows how to run a diocese, someone who's had experience as a pastor. But also he's always been one of a major speaker at most of the synods on bishops and a lot of the different types of meetings in the Curia. So he's very well known. But what struck me personally when I met him, I was a young priest at the time, and I just kind of met him during a coffee break, and I didn't even realize that, I barely realized he was a cardinal, except for the color of his sash. He was so down to earth. And he was so real and sincere in the way that he treated me and the way he treated everyone else. It was only later when I kind of asked around who was that I realized that he was someone who had so much respect among the other cardinals.
And we actually have video of Cardinal Bergoglio with John Paul II. We're showing, and let me bring in Chris Matthews. Chris, as he is described as a man of great simplicity, often found walking the streets of Buenos Aires to meet and talk to people. He's been critical of political and economic corruption in Argentina's elite. We know that exists throughout the world, but great conversation regarding Latin America here. But what is your reaction, Chris Matthews?
Well, I guess it's going to have to be explained by the shift of the church to the south, that as Europe is sort of been hollowing itself out in terms of population and religiosity over the last several decades, the church has maintained its strength and its numbers, certainly dramatically so in South America, and as was pointed out earlier, also growing exponentially in Africa. So this is an axis shift from the north to the south, a dramatic, I have to tell you, blows me away. This is a big decision, and I'm going to try to study the fact of who this guy is, because, I love the fact he has a Jesuit connection. He was a Jesuit provincial, and I think that means he has a brain and he's thinking. And I'm not being sarcastic.
No,
I'm really serious. I mean, he's got a big brain, and if he's connected with the Jesuits. And but the idea of Latin America is really powerful stuff. And Buenos Aires, this is going to be very interesting. I got to do a little study on this fellow.
Liz, let me bring you in.
Further.
Some of the analysis has been that the Cardinal's name was not one of the ones that we've talked about a lot. We know his position after Pope Benedict XVI was selected, but this time around, it appears, at least in the world press, not a great amount of buzz. Talk to me a little bit about that, and as well as his age, being 76 years old.
I think it tells us that the conclave is full of surprises. I think he was dismissed very early on. Everybody was talking younger pope, everybody was talking someone who would be a little bit more ready to face these kinds of challenges. He's only 2 years younger than the age that Benedict was when he was elected. But I do think it does allow us to understand that the cardinals, if they were already talking and already the way we saw them thinking in all these different directions, I think it's a really wonderful sense of harmony among the cardinals to come to this kind of conclusion that after all these predictions that seem to be leading us far away from Bergoglio, that ultimately they came back to this name. It's a really a very, very hopeful sign that the men who will follow him out onto that balcony truly are 100% behind him.
Yes, and James, let me get your reaction to the announcement as well. We need to get your voice in on that.
I am floored. When we first thought about who we should support as a potential pope, Cardinal Jorge was one of those characters who you wanted to support, but you never dreamed that they would have the support of the entire conclave. He did come in second in 2005, and that's why I actually, spoke to him early on in some of my media work, talking about Bergoglio as the kind of person that we wanted. And it's because he had this reputation for being really concerned about the poor and social justice priorities for the church. Like others have said, he's very modest. He rides public transportation. He lives in a private flat, not in a palace. He's a man of the people. And he's a Jesuit, like Chris mentioned. That is incredibly important. The Jesuits are the future of the church in America, in the sense that they're reasonable people who are able to articulate the church's teachings with compassion, and also to speak prophetically about the social teachings in terms of the need to care for the poor. So I am absolutely floored about this.
Here we are. Let's listen in.
vos. Fratelli e sorelle,
Brothers and sisters,
buonasera.
good evening.
Voi sapete
You know
che
that
il dovere del conclave
the duty of the conclave
era di dare un vescovo a Roma.
was that of giving a bishop
Sembra
to
che
Rome.
I miei
It
fratelli
appears
cardinali
that my
sono andati a
brothers, the
prenderlo
cardinals,
quasi alla fine del
went
mondo.
to get it all
Ma
over to
siamo
the end
qui.
of the world.
Vi ringrazio l'accoglienza.
I want to thank you very much for your welcoming.
La comunità diocesana di Roma al suo
The
vescovo.
community of
Grazie.
Rome has
E
its
prima di
bishop.
tutto,
Thank you. And first of all,
vorrei
I
fare una
would
preghiera
like to
per il nostro vescovo emerito,
say a
Benedetto
prayer
XVI.
for our Bishop Emeritus, Benedict XVI.
Preghiamo tutte
Let's
insieme
pray all together
per lui, perché il
for
Signore lo
him,
benedica
so
e la
that the
Madonna lo
Lord bless
custodisca.
him, and together
Padre
with the
nostro
Virgin
che sei
Mary,
nei
our
cieli,
Father
sia
who are in
santificato
heaven,
il tuo nome, venga il tuo regno, sia fatta la tua volontà, come in cielo così in terra. Dacci oggi il nostro pane quotidiano e rimetti a noi i nostri debiti, come noi lo rimettiamo ai nostri debitori, e non ci indurre in tentazione,
deliver us
ma liberaci dal
from
male.
evil.
Ave Maria, piena di grazia, il
Hail
Signore
Mary,
è con te, sei benedetta tra le donne, e benedetto il frutto del tuo seno, Gesù. Santa Maria, Madre di Dio, prega per noi peccatori, adesso e nell'ora della nostra morte. Amen. Gloria al Padre e al Figlio
Glory
e allo
to
Spirito
the
Santo.
Father, the Son, and
Era
the
nel
Holy
principio,
Spirit.
e ora e sempre, nei secoli dei secoli. Amen. E adesso
And now,
incominciamo questo cammino,
let's
vescovo e popolo,
this path together, the
questo cammino della
bishop
Chiesa di Roma,
with the
che è quella
people,
che presiede
the
nella carità
path
tutte le
of the
chiese.
Church of Rome that
Un cammino
presides
di
in
fratellanza,
charity all
d'amore,
of the churches, path
fiducia fra
in
noi.
brotherhood, love and trust
Preghiamo
between us. Let's
sempre per
pray
noi, l'uno per
together
l'altro.
for all of us,
Preghiamo per tutto il
for one
mondo,
another. Let's pray for the world,
perché ci sia una grande fratellanza.
so that there is a big
Ti
brotherhood.
auguro che questo cammino di Chiesa
I wish that this
che oggi incominciamo e chi mi
of the
aiuterà,
church
il
that we
mio
will
cardinale
begin
vicario qui
today,
presente,
and
sia
my
fruttuoso per la
vicar cardinal will help
evangelizzazione
me with,
di questa
will
tanta bella
be
città.
the evangelization of this beautiful city.
E adesso vorrei
And now,
dare la benedizione,
I would
ma
like to bless
prima vi chiedo un favore.
But first of
Prima che il
all,
vescovo
I
benedica il
ask you
popolo,
for a favor. Before
chiedo
that the
che
bishop
voi
blesses the people,
pregate al Signore perché mi
I
benedica
wanna
la preghiera
ask
del popolo,
you
chiedendo la
that you
benedizione
ask
per il suo
the
vescovo.
Lord to bless the bishop.
Facciamo in silenzio
Let's pray
questa
in
preghiera di voi
silence.
su di me.
Please pray in silence for me.
il Santo Padre Francesco, a tutti i fedeli presenti e a quelli che ricevono la sua benedizione a mezzo della radio, della televisione,
through the radio, the TV, and the new communication technologies, gives the plenary indulgence in the form established by the Church. Let's pray God omnipotent, so that he will preserve for a long time the Pope to guide the Church, and so that he gives peace to the Church and the whole world. And now I will give you the benediction to you and to the entire world, to all men and women of goodwill.
Sancti Apostolis Petrus et Paulus,
may the holy apostles Peter and Paul, in whose power and authority we have confidence, intercede on our behalf to the Lord. Through the prayers and merits of the Blessed Mary, ever Virgin, of Blessed Michael the Archangel, of Blessed John the Baptist, and of the holy apostles Peter and Paul, and all of the saints, may Almighty God have mercy on you, and with your sins forgiven, may Jesus Christ lead you into everlasting life. May the Almighty and merciful Lord grant you indulgence, absolution, and remission all of your sins, time for a true and fruitful penance, an always repentant heart, and amendment of life, the grace and consolation of the Holy Spirit, and final perseverance in good works. And may the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit descend on you and remain with you always. Brothers and sisters, I leave. Thank you very much for your welcoming. Pray for me, and I will see you soon. Tomorrow I want to go to pray the Virgin Mary so that she keeps Rome. Have a good evening and rest well.
Francis I now re-entering St. Peter's. We will not see him again today. Let me bring in Father Bertunes. We heard the remarks from this man speaking of beginning this path together, the bishop with the people. You've had an opportunity to meet him personally. Just to see that smile, Father, I think was so powerful. The kindness of his voice. What is your reaction to his initial words to the world?
I'm deeply moved and I'm deeply impressed. In many ways, he broke all the protocols. He gave a little speech off the cuff, and it was right from the heart. As you said, Tamron, we could tell his warmth was contagious. And what he said, he actually used an image of the road. We're going to begin this road together. I'm the Bishop of Rome, you're the people of Rome. We're going to walk this road together. And then he prayed for, he had all of us here together pray for Pope Emeritus Benedict, said a prayer for him, and then before he gave the blessing to the city and the world, he asked the entire crowd, which has been cheering, thousands, we're probably at tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000 people by now, he asked them to pray in silence over him, to pray for God to bless him before he gave them the blessing. And immediately when he bowed down so that we could pray over him and pray for him, there was absolute silence in this square. It was chilling and deeply moving.
Let me also bring in Father Mesa. He's with the San Antonio Diocese, born in Mexico. Father Mesa, your reaction to Pope Francis I of Argentina, South American. What are your thoughts right now?
Well, I guess the church in Latin America is very happy because it's the first time in the history of the church that we have a Pope from Latin America, Jorge Martinez Bergoglio from Argentina. It's the first impressions that I receive from the people from Latin America is just exactly that they are happy. They are very happy to receive this news, to receive the news that we have a Latin American Pope for the first time in the history. And you know, the majority of 2/3 of Catholics live in Latin America and in Africa, especially of course in Mexico and the United States. We have a large Hispanic population, and this Bergoglio will represent an important leader for us. You know, when I was talking to the people, what do you expect from a Pope? What do you expect from him? The majority of them, people from San Antonio, Texas, from Los Angeles, from Mexico, they told me we want a spiritual leader, a pastor. They were not looking for a CEO, they were not looking for a business manager, but they were looking for a spiritual leader and a pastor. And I guess that God listened to their pleas, because Jorge Martinez Bergoglio, the Pope Francis, is exactly the pastor that, you know, the hearts of the Hispanics were waiting for.
Liz, let me bring you in to react to Father Mesa's words. You know, demeanor says so much, and we will learn much more about Pope Francis I. But you heard Father Bertunes talk about the fact that he takes public transportation, a simple man, but from his words, his prayer for the Bishop Emeritus, and his demeanor, down to, I cannot say enough, to that smile to the audience there. What does that say?
I think this is going to be a very remarkable beginning to a pontificate. I was struck when he walked out. If you check back in the other first appearances, you'll almost always see the Pope wearing already that rich red velvet sash. And to have him standing there, that still figure in that pure white, looking down benignly over the crowd, he opened up with just a little wry allusion to himself, already engaging us, and then he brought us into prayer. He drew us all together. He He made us smile a little, and then he made us silent, and he made us pray. This man has a tremendous capacity to speak to a crowd of, it's tens of thousands in there. And it's going to be, I think, quite an interesting pontificate, because already the beginning is different from anything we've ever seen.
Absolutely. Chris Matthews, I'd like to get your thoughts. You heard Father Mesa talk about the members of the church he'd spoken with in San Antonio, Texas, and their prayers was not a CEO, not a businessman, but a man of the people. And here in this address, some of it spontaneous, at least the words matched what Father Mesa says he was hearing from some of the faithful.
Yeah, I think what we saw, and I had the same reaction you did, Tamron, to the smile and how he related to the people. I think we have perhaps another John the 23rd here. We'll see. John the 23rd. Somebody can connect. And he certainly beat all the great mentioners. His name wasn't even on the list. It didn't even show up in all the papers we've been getting here at NBC and everywhere else. He was a sleeper, and he came up and won this thing. We're going to have to find out somehow how this happened, but it did say to me, he's a Jesuit, he's from the Americas, he's got an Italian background, a lot of it does mix together here well, successfully, and most importantly, he's pastoral. And I think he didn't give one of those monotonic things you get from some of the others from Rome. You get a person, a human being talking to other human beings, rather than one of these people reading monotonically from some ecclesiastical tract. And I think that was powerful. And I'm completely with you, Tamron, on this, about your reaction to it.
Yeah, it's incredible. And to your point, it's too early to make those comparisons, but you see the gentleness in his eyes, and I can't help but to think of the reaction that young people, including myself at the time, had to John Paul II. And you feel this indescribable energy, without getting too ahead of myself here, but I want to bring in James Salt. James, you have been critical of the church. I think by fair terms, your concerns about the handling and the abuse of children, so much so you started a petition to prevent certain cardinals from participating. They still did in the case of the Los Angeles Cardinal, Mahoney at the time. But with that said, you are impressed with the selection of Pope Francis I. Why are you in belief, as a person who's been critical and skeptical, that this is the right man at the right time?
Yeah, As a Catholic who loves the church, I've been incredibly saddened by the poor leadership that we've seen from stridently reactionary leadership in our church. Those who want to use religion as a bludgeon, to say that you're wrong politically and try to diminish you in the public square. Bergoglio, as a Jesuit, now Francis I, represents something, really different and inspiring in that the church can be a source of inspiration for those of us who want something more. That's what I'm seeing. And, the fact that he's older, it tells me that, maybe I'll give him a little bit more deference on his politics around gay marriage or contraception. But, hopefully it'll be a shorter pontificate, and he'll be able to bring about some reforms that are needed so that the next generation of leadership can come in and take us to a new place.
And especially when given he's been very critical of political and economic corruption of Argentina elites. Let me go back to Father Mesa. To that point, Father, when you know that this new Pope has kept an eye on political and economic corruption, if you will, inequality that we see throughout the world, but also in Latin America, that this disparity that exists globally for the haves, if you will, and the have-nots, and this is this new Pope's focus. How does that make you feel?
Well, I think that this Pope will bring something important to the church. Of course, he's a pastor, he's a leader. But if you remember, he mentioned at the end of his first blessing that he was going to visit Our Lady. The devotion that Latin Americans, Mexican, Argentinian, Colombians, and Hispanics in the United States have to our Blessed Mother is real big. It's one of our first devotion, Our Lady of Guadalupe, and it's important. And it was I was impressed when Pope Francis mentioned that one of his first acts will be to go and visit our Blessed Mother, because that reflects our Blessed Mother is in the heart of us. It's in the heart of Latin Latin Americans, you know, the celebration of Our Lady of Guadalupe is a big event in many Latin American countries. In the United States, of course, and in Mexico, it's a big event. And this Pope will bring also the devotions of Latin America to the Church. We have, I think that the devotions that we have are one of the richness in the Church, and that will be a very important part that this Pope will bring to the Church.
Father Mesa, I will let you get to the celebration and the prayers I know that you will participate in. I really appreciate you joining us. Chris Jansing, let me bring you back in. And you know, when we've talked about the growth of the Church, especially during the hardest and most difficult times when the details of the abuse that were emerging in the lawsuits, the great focus was on Latin America, Asia, and Africa as the places where the Church could grow at a time when so many, quite honestly, in the States had grown skeptical of the direction of the Church. And here we have this momentous occasion, a Pope from South America.
It's hard to even put into words how extraordinary this is, what we're watching here. And a key question so many of us have had, and that you've talked about, Tamron, and that we've talked about ever since Pope Benedict decided to step down was, would the Church find a new direction? Would the Church have a new face geographically in terms of its theology? And while I would not say that this is a man whose theology is going to take a big step away from what we've seen in the Church, there is something very clearly different here. The respect that he earned within the College of Cardinals really did stem in large part from the fact that he was someone who could bridge the gap between those who were more conservative and those who were more moderate. And we knew going in what kinds of attributes they were looking for in a new pope. They wanted someone who could go out into the world and evangelize. He has done it on every scale. We just saw, as you so aptly pointed out, the warmth, the compassion that comes from him. But also we've heard stories about him going into a community for victims of HIV/AIDS and getting down on his hands and knees and washing their feet. We've heard of him going out into the streets and meeting the people. This is a man of great humility. This is a man who is a cardinal and as one of the highest members of the Roman Catholic Church humbled himself to be out that way as an evangelizer. And again, I don't think this can be talked about enough. This is someone who has supported social justice. Right. And this is so critical right now in the world when we are looking at the divide. We've talked about it in America, but look at it around the world. The divide between the haves and the have-nots, the rich and the poor, at a time when in many places across the world this divide is getting larger. Here you have someone who has studied it, who has written about it, and who has preached about it in a very meaningful way. I just think that this is extraordinary, and for a lot of people who are looking at this church to say, what is the possibility for change, for moving forward? You are seeing some development that is, I think, completely unanticipated, at least over the last several days.
Let me bring in Mike Barnacle. He's able to join us. Mike, I know you've talked about this greatly on Morning Joe. I heard you even this morning. What is your gut reaction, if you will, to the selection of this man who studied and earned a diploma in chemistry, ordained as a priest December 13th, 1969, but has lived his life in great service and today wanted to begin the path with the people and ask for their prayers, Mike?
Well, he was ordained in the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit tradition, the tradition of social justice. And it's as if the board of directors, if you will, the College of Cardinals, the Curia of the Catholic Church, chose a representative of a growth industry in the Catholic Church. Latin America, South America, the Third World, Africa. This is an extraordinary and historic development. This Pope coming from Argentina, representative of an area of the world where the Catholic Church is enjoying enormous growth. I am going to assume that part of the appeal of the Cardinal was the fact that he is a good administrator, and the Vatican needs to be managed. And I think he probably has a strong management hand that he's shown throughout his career as a priest and as a cardinal. In addition to the humility that was just spoken to, which is critical in the next Pope, the ability to show Catholics around the world that he is a humble man, that he had to serve the faith, to grow the faith. that he knows about income disparity, not only in his homeland of Argentina and Latin America, but throughout the world, a critical component of the Catholic faith, ministering to the poor, ministering to everyone, but especially to the poor.
Yeah. And to your point, we were on earlier with Father Mesa, born in Mexico. He's in San Antonio, Texas, and he talked about what the faithful there that he'd spoken with desired, and they didn't want a CEO or a businessman, if you will, but we know in real terms that is what the church needs, given even some of the negative reporting regarding finances. But it seems as if this initial reaction to this new pope is of balance, that compassion that you want as a person who will lead the church and provide comfort, but the realities of life. And it seems, at least right now, Mike, that that's the reaction to this man.
Yeah, and you know, we're going to find out, Tamron, in the immediate future, I would think, rather than the long-term distance of his papacy. We're going to find out whether or not the Pope, the incoming Pope, realizes the need to address the past transgressions, certainly of the past 10 to 15 years, in a way that the two prior popes have not, or did not, that the church badly needs this pope to address issues as have occurred in the United States with the sexual abuse scandal. The pope badly needs to address publicly the issues of supposed transgressions within the Vatican Bank, the financial transgressions. And I think he has a strong enough voice now. This is a pivotal moment for the church, and certainly for this incoming Pope, Pope Francis I. He's got to speak publicly to this, I would think, and hopefully he will.
Let me go to Miguel Almaguer. He is live in Rio with the reaction. Miguel.
Certainly there is a lot of celebration here in Latin America. There's some disappointment in Rio. One of the top contenders for the papacy was, of course, a cardinal in Sao Paulo, just a few hours from where we are. So there was certainly some disappointment. But for across this region, tons of excitement. Some 40%, 1 out of every 4 Catholics everywhere in the world lives here in the region of Latin America. So that Latin American Catholic religion number is so huge and so important here. It really is a way of life. Many folks have joked to us that soccer and religion go hand in hand here. It's a huge win for this region of the country. Of course, Brazil has recently got the World Cup and the Olympics, and now Argentina has the Pope. This is something that so many folks had been praying for. We have been here in Rio for the last several days. We have been to churches. We have seen folks tell us that they were praying for a Pope of Latin American descent. That's what they got. We know the Pope, who was elected, has lived in Buenos Aires most of his life. He was born there. He's one of 5 children. He comes from, his parents are of Italian descent. Many are of Italian descent in that country. Some 40 million people live in Argentina. 70% of that country is, of course, Catholic. And the numbers, as we...
We just lost our connection with Miguel Almaguer, but let me bring Liz back in, our historian. And Liz, you heard Miguel cite the numbers there, but it is also interesting. You have the Pope from Buenos Aires, a major city referred to as the Paris of South America, but again, even with its beauty, representing what this Pope sees as a priority, which is certainly the constant conversation that is happening worldwide about the disparity, and that he is focused so heavily on that. Put that in perspective, and maybe not in comparison necessarily to Benedict XVI, but what we've seen in recent history.
I think in the continuation from Benedict XVI, we already see this new Pope Francis I making a very solemn acknowledgement of his affection towards the Pope Emeritus. But again, I keep looking at this name, and it just keeps opening up a world of thoughts about what's happening right now. It was Francis. This new Pope is a Jesuit. The Jesuits were founded by St. Ignatius. St. Ignatius was a huge follower of Francis, and in fact modeled the Jesuits after Francis in his commitment to poverty and his commitment to evangelization. And both of these things come out in that very first speech, where he stands out there very humble, very willing to welcome everyone, but he also speaks of evangelization. So there's going to be a man who's going to be dealing not only with the questions of material poverty and disparity, but clearly he also has a mind to spiritual poverty and helping people become more enriched spiritually during his reign as Pope.
Father Bertunez, let me bring you in. on it. One of the reasons cited by Pope Benedict at the time was the travel. We know that there have been concerns of his inability to carry on. Might we see, given this Pope's desire to evangelize, him travel more? What do you expect, your anticipation as he does settle in to the job, if you will?
It's a
and
great
it
question.
is quite a job.
Actually, yeah, it's quite a job, and settling in, it might take a little while.
Yeah.
But it's a good question for this man in particular, because as Cardinal, as Archbishop of Buenos Aires, and as Cardinal, he actually didn't travel very much, and neither did he give very many interviews. He only, I think, gave 3 interviews since he was named a Cardinal. I think it was named by Pope John Paul II. So he hasn't done a lot of travel. He hasn't done a lot of but he, kind of that type of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how he sees his role now as Pope. One of when he was giving his first blessing and his first comments and kind of greeting the people, he emphasized his role as Bishop of Rome. We all know the Pope is actually the Bishop of the city of Rome, as well as the head of the church throughout the world. And he emphasized that role, the Bishop of Rome, welcoming the people, blessing them, talking about evangelizing the city of Rome. And what struck me, again, just thinking about this first glimpse that we've had of Francis I, he came out and the smile that you mentioned and his atmosphere, he was very fatherly. He was very much, the word Pope actually is kind of an English translation of Papa, which means dad. So a spiritual father for the family, and he even began his comments making a little bit of a joke. He said the cardinals gathered in the Sistine Sistine Chapel, and they actually chose somebody from the other end of the world to be Pope, and he kind of laughed at himself.
Yes,
so we see this ability to connect, this pastoral sense. Will that translate into travels? Will that translate into an international papacy? We don't really know. We'll have to see.
And quickly, the inauguration mass follows. The date to be set by the new Pope. What else can you tell us regarding the next few days?
Yeah, what will probably happen is that tomorrow he will celebrate Mass with the cardinals, or at least meet with the cardinals and give them, speak to them, thank them, and give them an idea of what his hopes are for the pontificate. And then together they will probably decide the date for the inaugural Mass, which could be 2 days from now, it could be 5 days from now. We really don't know. It's interesting that he mentioned that he wants to also tomorrow make a visit to the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Yes.
Obviously, as a devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary, is considered she was the mother of Jesus, and she's considered spiritually the mother of all Catholics and all Christians. So I don't know if that means will he make that visit in one of the chapels inside the Vatican, or maybe he'll make a visit to one of the shrines in the city of Rome. We don't really know. So there's a lot we're going to have to find out. But by the end of tomorrow, we should know when the inauguration Mass will be scheduled to take place.
And Chris Jansing, you've been there following. Let me get your quick last reaction before we wrap up this hour.
I think that this is an extraordinary moment. I think this is obviously history being made. It's an acknowledgement of Latin America and the growth there. I think there's much yet to be seen, and there's a certain excitement about that. For American Catholics who are wondering if there are going to be changes on things like sexual morality, that's not going to happen. But you see a man of great compassion and someone who has reached out to the suffering and the poor, and that is something that will definitely resonate, Tamron. And so we will wait and see.
Yeah, it's been an incredible hour. Thank you all for joining us with great insight. Mike Barnacle, thank you as well for getting here to give your reaction. I know you'll have more on Morning Joe, but we watched again history being made as the world was introduced to the Pope, elected in 2 days after 5 ballots taken. Pope Francis I of Argentina, the first ever from the Americas, and the first from outside of Europe in more than a millennium. This has been an incredible hour. We will continue our coverage. Martin Bashir is up next after a break.